child, I knew two things about growing up. One, I would be a scientist, and two, I would never be a woman. I know you're looking at me right now and you're thinking to yourself, well, you've obviously failed at one of those. I can assure you, I am indeed a scientist, though. You see, I thought that women were weak and they were a burden on men and something that needed to be cared for. And it was those characteristics that meant that women were excluded from so many things that I wanted to be a part of. So my solution for this was to emphasize anything masculine about myself and really suppress anything feminine. Many, if not most, of my friends growing up were boys, and I engaged in rough and tumble play well into adolescence. I remember this game that we used to play where one of my classmates would sit on the ground and another person would walk in a circle around them while the person sitting would punch the person walking as hard as they could in the thigh, screaming, "Walk!" The longer you walked, the tougher you were. So when it came time for me to walk in that circle, with every cycle and with every punch, I just kept saying to myself, "Come on, Dina, just one more time. You can take it." After all, what could be more masculine than being able to take a punch, right? So, despite rejecting anything feminine about myself, I do remember the first time I felt powerful as a woman. I was 14 and I was at a nearby lake with my sister, and her friend pulled up on a boat and asked us if we wanted to go for a ride, and of course we wanted to go for a ride. So we got on and I was getting ready to sunbathe, so I was taking off my clothes, which revealed my body in a brand new two-piece bathing suit. And as I did that, I happened to catch the glance of her friend. And the look he gave me was intoxicating. I remember thinking, holy shit, I think men might do things for me because I look good in a bikini. And that feeling of power persisted because he started to pursue me. It also scared the shit out of me because he was a lot older than me, but I calmed those fears by telling myself that I must be really, really special if he was willing to risk so much to be with me. And I loved feeling special, unlike most 14-year-olds. So as the initial flirting turned into a relationship, I continued to feel very special because he was constantly heaping praise on me, telling me what an amazing person I was, how I was such a great girlfriend, how I was really more like a guy, a compliment I've heard many times in my life. We went hunting together, we watched sports together, and because there was a significant age difference, we had to keep our relationship a secret. So we spent a lot of our time late at night with his friends after I had snuck out, drinking and smoking pot. And it was during that time that I really became one of the guys. I knew all of their secrets. I knew who was having an affair. I knew who was still smoking weed, even though they had told their wives they had quit. I was anything but excluded, and I loved it. However, as time went on and I started to express my own desires, like wanting to go to college or wanting to be a scientist, it didn't take very long before he started to treat me like a woman. I was 17. We were fighting again about me going to college and whether he was going to come with me. And I got out of the car to walk home and hopefully stop the fight, like I had done so many times before. But this time, he got out of the car and started walking after me and was yelling at me, telling me I was a baby and to stop being such a child. And he came around the front of the car and he threw me into a pile of rocks. I was stunned. I stood up, blood dripping down the right side of my body. I turned around, I went back into his house, locked myself in the bathroom, and started to cry. And his mom overheard me, and so she came in to check on me, and as she was helping me clean the blood off of my legs, she said, "Ugh, I hate it when he does this to you girls." And I said, "Girls? Plural?" There had been rumors that he was abusive towards his ex-girlfriends, and his friends had warned me that he had a temper on him, but I honestly didn't think it would happen to me. After all, I was special. So after that first violent encounter, I decided to deal with it the way I thought any man would, and I fought back. If he hit me, I hit him. If he called me names, I came back with something just as mean and hurtful. And in the end, we decided that he would come to college with me. So we packed up all our stuff and we moved 1,000 miles away from our hometown together. Even though the whole time I was just wishing that he would ask me to marry him so I could finally break up with him. And that isolation and distance didn't really help our relationship. There was one time we were in the car and he was driving and we were fighting about the fact that he had made me hang out with his ex-girlfriend the night before, something he never would have put up with from me. And he just kept telling me to stop being a baby and stop being such a child and to grow up, and I finally just got so mad that I punched him in the face. And I knew right away I was in trouble, and so I scrambled into the back seat. So he's driving with his left hand, and he's reaching behind him with his right. And all of a sudden, he lets out this horrific yell, and he swings his arm around, and it comes back into the front seat. But as it does that, it catches me in the nose, and blood just comes pouring out and all over my white t-shirt. He had dislocated his shoulder. So we paused our fight so that I could take him to the hospital. And as they were setting his shoulder, the doctor pulled me aside and pointed to the blood on my shirt and said, once things are bad more often than they're good, it might be time to leave. I politely explained to her that things were totally fine and that this was just an accident. All the while thinking, I'm sure your relationship isn't perfect either, lady. But what I was feeling was an enormous amount of shame and embarrassment that she had figured out what I was letting him do to me. So meanwhile, I'm in college, and I'm working towards that second goal of becoming a scientist. You all had forgotten about that, hadn't you? But it was in college that I had worked in some labs and I had discovered molecular biology, and I really just fell in love with it. How does the DNA in our cells get turned into molecules that make our bodies work? It was also during that time and during that experience in the lab that I was perfecting the art of suppressing my femininity. I never wore makeup. I rarely did my hair. I always wore jeans and t-shirts or tank tops. And I did my best to exclude other women from the academic environment. I did this the same way many men do. I spoke to men more often, I collaborated with men more often, and I judged those women who wore high heels or pink or dresses as childish and not serious. But it was also that love of molecular biology that made me want to become an academic scientist. I'm not gonna lie, I think the fact that academic science had seemed like a masculine pursuit probably influenced that as well. But when my boyfriend came to me and said that he wanted to transfer to a new school out of state, a school that didn't offer a molecular biology program, I refused to go with him. So we didn't break up right away. We continued to date long distance, and during that time I was inundated with voicemails where I heard things like I was a slut when he couldn't reach me on the phone. I was an idiot because I didn't know his flight was delayed. I was selfish because I wouldn't change my major and move with him. I was so fucking book smart, and why didn't I have any common sense? And even when he was apologizing, he still found a way to make it seem like my fault. If the violence caused injury, he was sorry that I was small, that my body was too small to withstand the punishment. And those things that had seemed so normal while we were living together, now with a little bit of distance, seemed completely insane. So after a year of harassing voicemails and with a lot of support from my lab members, I ended the relationship. But if that relationship did one thing, it reinforced the idea that women are weak and that the only way you survive is to be as masculine as possible. And in the years since, I've had to work really hard to overcome that way of thinking. I've done this through individual therapy, through women's group therapy, and by volunteering at a rape crisis and domestic violence shelter. And through those experiences, I've been able to redefine for myself masculine and feminine and strength and weakness, because survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault are some of the strongest people you will ever meet, regardless of their gender. But even after all of that work, it is still hard for me. I still don't like being seen as a woman when I'm at the bench, and it's really hard for me to express my femininity when I'm also a scientist. And this can sometimes surprise me in ways I never really thought about. I gave birth about 9 months ago, and if there is one state that screams feminine, it is being pregnant. Being pregnant was dizzying for me because there was no escape. I woke up every morning and went to work with this huge reminder that I am a woman. And now I'm a mom. And I'm raising a little boy. And all of that work that I put in to accepting myself as both masculine and feminine, I have to teach to him. Because what I really want is to raise him to be the boy and man I wish I would have known.